know when it's ready to go.
We are live.
Good evening, Council Rock community, and welcome to our June board business meeting. I can't believe we are halfway through 2020, and I hope we can get through the next half faster than we got through the first half. I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask Dr. Thorwart to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United
United States of America,
to the republic
the
for
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
and justice.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Kristen Marcel? Kristen Marcel? Can you hear
Sorry.
me? Okay. Ed Solomon?
Here.
Andy Block?
I am here.
Mark Bialik?
Here.
Ed Tate?
Here.
Mike Thorwart?
Here.
Denise Brooks?
Here.
Marion McKee?
Here.
Joe Hidalgo?
Here.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Dr. Frazier, Superintendent report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Block, and good evening, everyone. Allow me to first offer our collective congratulations to our class of 2020. You are now officially CR alumni. We're proud of you, we stand with you, and we stand in support of you as you go out into the world and make it better than you found it. I want to thank our CR staff, our local police and fire departments for making Monday's car parade one that was meaningful and memorable for our beloved class of 2020 and their families. I particularly want to thank Mr. Sanko, Mr. Fredrickson, Ms. McCarthy, Mr. Funk, and our high school administrative teams for their valiant efforts to make this experience happen for our students. Congratulations again to the class of 2020. And speaking of making the world a better place, I've been hearing from some students and alumni about their concerns with racial injustices that have obviously gained considerable nationwide attention in recent weeks, particularly after the deaths of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery. Like many, I've been deeply disturbed by these senseless killings of African American citizens. Many of our students and alumni are similarly disturbed, and they're looking to be agents of change. I commend and I applaud them for that. Further, we stand with them in their call to action. The simple fact of the matter is that the Council Rock School District, like all school districts, has a responsibility to educate and inform our students about these vitally important matters before they graduate, before they enter a world that may very well look and feel substantially different from the 72 square miles that comprise our Council Rock School District. We've made many efforts in recent years to provide ongoing equity-based staff training and to incorporate greater diversity into our curricula at every grade level. And yet, we know that even more work remains. In fact, we know that much more work remains. And our responsibility here isn't merely to prepare our student body for a world that awaits them upon graduation, but also, and incredibly importantly, to create a culture in our schools and throughout our school community that embraces diversity in all of its various forms. The culture I reference is not one of tolerance. Our objective must never be to merely tolerate who we are inside and out. What we're after is acceptance, and more than that, celebration. We want our students and we want our school community to genuinely value all that we have in common, and all of which makes us very unique in our own ways. Our students, every single one of them, deserve that during their 13 years in Council Rock. My team and I look forward to working with our students, alumni, staff, parents, the school board, and others to turn this vision into reality for every single one of our students every single day. Now, as we look ahead to the fall and the planned reopening of our schools, please know that we have a task force that is planning for a variety of scenarios that we may encounter in the upcoming school year. We absolutely do expect to open our doors on August 31st for the first day of school. We're currently examining what exactly that will look like. The scenarios we're planning for, not just for the start of the year, but as conditions might change during the school year, include the following: being fully open with no or minimal social distancing requirements. I think we're all ready to get back to that, and hopefully at some point we will. Another scenario is, of course, being open with social distancing guidelines in place. This scenario could result in phased student schedules. We also need to be prepared to close our doors, our school doors, at a moment's notice in the event that we have a COVID-19 outbreak at one or more of our schools. As such, we all must be ready to transition to distance learning with little notice. We're also planning to be fully remote again for a period of time next year, if needed, and only if needed. We learned a lot about distance learning over these past 3 months, and parental feedback via the survey that we're conducting is already proving to be extremely helpful in guiding our efforts to improve our distance learning program. And as a reminder to parents, that survey is still active. It closes next Friday. So thanks. I think we have about 2,900 folks who have already completed that survey. And if you've yet to have a chance to do so, it will be open for another 8 days. So please do take the time to do that if you're able. And finally, we also need to have a flexible, differentiated model for students, families, and staff members who may be of heightened risk to COVID-19. And please note here that as we plan for the myriad of safety considerations in play with reopening our schools, our concerns reside not only with our students, but with our staff as well. We'll need plans to keep everyone as safe as possible, and the level of risk is not necessarily the same between students and our adults, or even within the student population or within the adult population. We're currently working on the health and safety plan, which, once completed, will outline plans for opening the 2020-21 school year. As one of the starting points for this work, we'll be conducting surveys that will guide our planning efforts, and it will be important, really important, that we have as close to 100% participation as possible. We anticipate sending our first survey to all parents and all staff members at some point next week. So please be on the lookout for that via email. And in closing, under Act 39 of 2018, schools may but are not required to test for lead levels annually in the drinking water of any facility where children attend school. We fully tested all of our schools, including all accessible sinks and water fountains, during the 2018-19 school year, and we had planned to test again over these past couple of months. However, COVID-19 got in the way, and as you know, we have been closed for these past couple of months, and thus the Council Rock School District was unable to test these locations in the 2019-20 school year. But we do have plans in place to test all schools this summer before students return for the new school year, and we will submit those results as required by Act 39 of 2018 to the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Thanks, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. And just let me reiterate what a fantastic job that the entire administrative team centrally and at the high schools did with senior recognition activities for the class of 2020. Those parades were fantastic. The feedback that we've gotten on the virtual graduation was fantastic. I hope we've created some great new traditions potentially, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the kids come up with to hopefully get together at some point later on this summer when it's permissible. But I know, Dr. Frazier, Mr. Sanko, that you and the teams, you really put a lot of time. You talked to a lot of parents and got a lot of feedback prior. And I hope you're getting just as much feedback now about how great it was, because that's what I'm hearing. So well done, and we appreciate it. With that, can we move to Mr. Cox and the solicitor's report?
Mr. Block, the board held an executive session Monday, June 15th on a personnel matter, and that's all I have to report in this setting.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. All right, Ms. O'Grady, why don't we go to our public comment?
Very good. Make sure I'm okay. Our first public comment is from Valerie Mahone from Newtown. She says, my name is Valerie and I have a 5th grader and kindergartner attending this coming school year. I also work as an essential employee at a hospital. Coming from someone in the medical profession who is required to wear a mask all day, I strongly oppose my children having to wear one at school. During my work shift, I often feel like I cannot get enough oxygen and sometimes get lightheaded when worn for long periods of time. I will not submit my children to that. There are no studies showing that it is even safe for children to wear masks for hours on end. We have no idea if it will affect their developing brains and body. Another reason I request that we open up school normally is that children need a normal environment where they can learn and socialize. I see many problems with masks for students. They, for one, will be touching their face masks more often if they weren't wearing one. I see adults wearing masks and not using them correctly. Do you think children will? Fiddling with your mask, wearing it under your nose or under your chin defeats the purpose of wearing one. Never have schools subjected their children to such an unhealthy, uncomfortable, and anti-educational environment. So science cannot precisely define the total harm that it will cause. But science does tell us the risks from COVID-19 are too minimal to sacrifice the educational, social, emotional, and physical well-being of our very healthy and young children. Sincerely, Valerie Mahone. Our second comment is from Susan Cerrucci of Newtown. She writes, "Good evening. I hope this finds everyone well. I'd like to voice my thoughts before the meeting about reopening in the fall. First, I understand and appreciate the amount of pressure on you to decide not only what is best for the students' education, but also their mental and physical health, not to mention the impact that the decision will have on parents. I know the ultimate goal in the community is that we get through this together while trying to make sure we are addressing everyone's needs from all aspects. Having said that, I personally feel it will be in the best interest for our students to fully return to a normal school day with athletics and extracurricular activities. I think giving them back some normalcy will benefit both students and parents. I would also like to see no masks required. I'm sure you have seen the studies that show they really do nothing to prevent the spread of this virus, as well as it makes them touch their faces more. Additionally, it only serves to spread to fearmonger and cut off communication with covering of facial expressions. As it is, my son, who is a very social kid, will have trouble not high-fiving or giving his friends a pat on the back. What are we doing to our children? This virus, as you well know, does not affect children the way it affects our elderly. So much has been taken from them. I'd like to see the students be able to be kids again. I know for my children, who will be in the 4th and 12th grade, that the quarantine was very mentally and emotionally challenging for them. Distance learning served no one and tore them away from all that they love about being in a community. If we have to go into a government lockdown again, God forbid, at least give the students an opportunity to be free for a time. I'm praying for you all in this decision. It won't be easy, but I trust you will do the right thing. Regards, Susan Cerrucci." Our third comment came from Julie Schlosser of Newtown. She says, "I am writing in support of opening back up the schools in September. I believe the children need a sense of normalcy back into their lives. Please consider opening up without masks as well. Thank you very much, Julie Schlosser." Our next comment came from Krista Pinto of Upper Makefield. She writes, "There is significant data to support that we can safely reopen our schools. The risk of not reopening is far worse. Depression, anxiety, it goes on. Please support the safe reopening." Next, we heard from Deanna Palita of Newtown. She wrote, "We all received the email from Dr. Frazier regarding the task force that was put together. 1, who is on this task force and when can they have their contact information? 2, how are parents and students being represented? I have a petition with almost 500 signatures of parents who strongly agree with the school's reopening, normally with no mask. Someone in our group spoke to Dr. Damsker and he stated that he does not feel masks are needed, nor does he feel school would need to close again if cases start to increase in the fall. Children are not at risk for this virus. I advise someone on this committee to call Dr. Damsky directly and discuss this with him." And she cites Dr. Damsker's number. Next, we have a comment from Misty LaFleury of Newtown Township, who writes, "Hello, I appreciated receiving Dr. Frazier's email yesterday and his mention of a task force being created as well as a special committee being created to address issues about the district reopening in August. However, I am concerned about what appears to be the lack of student and parent inclusion in this reopening process. So I must ask, how will parents and students' input be included other than through surveys? And will the results of the surveys be shared with the CRSD community at large? Thank you. Misty LaFleury. Our next comment came from Rebecca Roosevelt of Ivyland, and she submitted a series of questions. Number one, who is on the task force and when will contact info be released? Two, we know that parents are included on the surveys, but why aren't parents and/or students being placed on the committees? Three, will the results of surveys be released, and if so, when and how? Four, I absolutely refuse to let my kids wear a mask at any time. When will we know if masks are required? And at any point, so we can make our own arrangements outside of CR. I do not want my tax money going to a school who will require masking kids. Five, is the district aware of how many masks greatly reduce proper breathing and oxygen levels in blood decrease? Six, is the district aware of hazards being placed requiring all parties to follow one course of action? Seven, is the district aware that parents want a dual option, one offering in school with no restrictions, and the second option is to stay home to do school online? If you are aware, it is a true consideration. Eight, is the district aware of what a true disaster online learning was for a lot of households? The mental and social ramifications will be sorted out for years. Are you aware that online school made no provisions for my son who has a 504? As parents of children in elementary, middle, and high school, we urge the school board to open in the fall with regular school, no restrictions. Our children have been through enough and deserve their education back. Our next comment comes from Joanna Hager, who did not list her residence. Dear school board members, after reading Dr. Frazier's email regarding the reopening task force, I have a few questions. The task force will consist of the cabinet, supervisor of pupil services, nursing coordinator, and the CREA and CRESPA presidents. There is nowhere that mentions input from parents or students. As a parent of a student attending Council Rock North, I would like to think that our opinions would be important. As with past decisions, the school district has always been open to the opinions of the taxpayers and students, and we are hoping that will continue to be the case. Here are my questions. Who specifically is on the task force, steering committee, and when will their contact information be made public? Will there be parents included on these committees? Once the parent-student surveys are closed, will those results be published? What is the planned timeline for a decision on reopening of schools? Requirement for wearing masks, extracurricular and co-curricular activities in the fall. Our next question came from Kelly Stepp of Richborough, and she writes, thank you, Dr. Frazier, for your email in regards to the reopening plan for CRSD. I'm happy to hear that so much thought and planning has gone into this process. However, I have a few questions I'm hoping you can answer. One, will our families have the choice to direct their children to not wear masks because of health conditions? If so, how will these children be treated in the normal student population? Two, how were these committees created, task force and steering team? Who picked them and on what guidance were they picked? Three, will you make the student parent survey results public? Four, will there be a description for the face masks that are acceptable? Example, N95, designs, etc., and documentation supporting that they work in this type of environment. I understand that there will be many questions along the way, as this is not a situation that we are familiar with, but want to make sure we create an environment that is backed by science and not political views. Thank you, Kelly Stepp. Our next comment came from Christine Nelson of Newtown. Christine submitted a series of questions. First, will you consider starting school without any restrictions for students? Two, since the health department guidelines are only recommendations and they are leaving it up to school districts to decide what they want to do, can parents sign waivers? Three, can we make mask and social distancing an option for parents and students to decide what is best for them? Four, if you decide to implement certain procedures for back to school, how is the district going to pay for it, given we have a huge budget deficit? Five, Will there be contact information for the new task force, steering and individual committees responsible for collecting data or making recommendations for back-to-school procedures? And next, there were no mention of parents or students being part of this new task force committee. How will we be represented besides through the surveys? And finally, will the survey results become public and when? Thank you, Christine. Our next comment is from Bridget Hogan Perry of Newtown. She writes, I am very interested in knowing who will be on the task force for reopening the schools. I did not have a great experience from my child with how the COVID distance learning was conducted, and I do not want my son to have his last year to be anything like the end of this year. He is on an IEP and he was not given what he needed to finish out this year. I don't fault the teachers at all. I am also very curious as to what background any of those on the task force will have. Will this be all folks who are one-sided on how schools should look in the future? We all should have a say, and there should be parents involved that represent all schools in the district. A survey is not enough. We are taxpayers, and we as parents deserve to be part of the task force. How much communication can we expect? The more, the better, in my opinion. Thank you in advance, and I hope to hear answers to these questions either by email or via the meeting. Our next comment comes from Kimberly of Richborough. She writes, Kimberly Pulowski McFinn of Richborough. And she writes, I read your email today about the committee to reopen the schools. I'm curious of the names of the people who are on the committee. I believe parents and students' voices need to be heard. I do not want my children to go back to school with masks on and without interaction with other children. My son is already struggling greatly from all the negative impacts of the social distancing. This is hurting our children immensely. I really hope that there will be options. If parents are afraid, they should be able to leave their kids at home. If not, and want their kids to experience school like they always have, our kids deserve that right. Concerned parent. The next comment is from Eagle Vasilikati of Newtown, who writes, I have 4 children who are students at Council Rock School District. I would like to let you know that I strongly oppose the use of face masks when the schools reopen. I truly believe it is not human to require children to wear a mask all day. It's not healthy to breathe in your own bacteria. I have to wear a mask at work and it's impossible. Please try it yourself. Not to mention, one of my children is epileptic and she cannot wear a mask. Please let parents choose if you want to let our children go back to school. The distance learning was absolutely horrible. They learned nothing. Children are getting depressed, and that's very serious. They need to go to school. They need to see their teachers and friends. They need to play sports and music. Please let us be responsible for our children, and if we feel it's safe enough to go to school, let us make that choice. How do you think we parents can work and pay for the bills if we still need to go to work? I'm a single mother of 4 children. I work very hard to afford my rent so my children can go to these schools. Distance learning would make us homeless. Thank you, Eagle. And that is our final comment for the evening.
Thank you, Ms. O'Grady. And heard a couple things I wanted to comment on. Firstly, I think it's probably almost daily that Dr. Frazier is speaking to Dr. Damsker. So you know, everybody out there should know that we are, I shouldn't say we, our administrative team is very close to their peer groups, all of the different support groups in the area, in the state, and also our local officials. And I would also say that, you know, one of the things that came through there was about parent and student involvement in the reopening plan. And I'd just like to provide some context for everybody in the sense of that we have about 5 weeks, if that, to work through a plan and approve a plan, and then the real work of implementing that plan and getting ready for the school year begins. So having as much inclusivity as you might normally like in a big initiative is going to be a real challenge for us here. Dr. Frazier, I don't know if you wanted to comment anything on public comment, or if you want to just have us go ahead and move on.
Well, let me first thank you for those comments, because I think they're spot on. We certainly do value parental input. As I had noted, obviously that public comment came in prior to my superintendent report this evening, but I did reference that and really truly hope that 100% of our parents are able to give us feedback via the surveys. We do anticipate multiple surveys, not just one, but we have not yet even had a chance to develop that first survey. We're going to have a draft hopefully early next week, and we'll hopefully be able to get that out by the middle of next week. And part of this, mind you, is that Dr. Damsker, as most of our parents know from the letter I sent out, did issue guidance to Council Rock and the 12 other Bucks County school districts, and that was only just about 72 hours ago. It was on Monday evening. So we are digesting that. I do talk with Dr. Damsker quite regularly. We email, we text, and we've gotten to know each other quite well. He's a fantastic gentleman. He's a true asset to the county, an asset to our school district. He's a parent himself in a neighboring district of school age kids, and really thank him for his work, his leadership. Also should take the time to thank Scott Forrester, who's the Bucks County Director of EMS, Emergency Management Services. He is typically on our twice a week superintendent countywide calls as well. And all I would say in terms of contact info, just please contact me. Send me an email if you have questions. Send me an email if you have suggestions that are burning. Otherwise, we would just ask that you give us some time to do this work based upon Dr. Damsker's recommendations that, again, only came out 3 days ago. We're going to lean on those recommendations pretty heavily, and we will be looking forward to your survey responses and using those to guide our work. Thanks, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. If I could now call on Mr. Bialik for letter G there to make a motion to pass the approval of minutes of our board meeting on May 21st, please.
I move to approve the minutes of the public meeting of the School Board of Directors on May 21st, 2020.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Salmon, for the second. Any questions? Any objections? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Please note the motion passed with unanimous consent. And with that, we will move to Mr. Tate for the Education Committee update and motions.
Thank you, Mr. Block. Education Committee last met June 11 as part of a joint committee meeting. Our next meeting is July 9, again as part of a joint committee meeting. And I'll move on to the motion. I move to approve consent agenda items B through D as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Any questions? Any objections? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Please note the motion passes with unanimous consent, Madam Secretary. And Mr. Tate, if we could move to letter E, please.
Letter E. I move to approve the reconfiguration of Rolling Hills Elementary School as described in the letter of today's date from Dr. Fraser to the Pennsylvania Secretary of Education and as attached to this agenda, and direct the administration to obtain PDE's approval of the reconfiguration. That's a motion.
Yep, need a second.
I'll second it.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Mr. Senko or Dr. Frazier, any quick comments here?
Thank you, Mr. Block. Anytime we change our configuration, we have to petition PDE. And so essentially what this letter says is that upon the completion of Rolling Hills Elementary School, we will relocate that student and staff population to their original home, the newly renovated Rolling Hills Elementary.
Thank you, Mr. Senko. Good news for that Rolling Hills community. Very close to getting back into a brand new building. Any questions for the administration? Any objections? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note that the motion passes with unanimous consent. And if we could move to Ms. Brooks for the Bucks County IU update, please.
Thank you. The IU met this week, and we had a lot of conversation just about the current state of our schools. Pennsylvania did approve a new state budget, which will become effective July 1st. We had talked about this last month. The budget is an interim spending plan that provides 5 months of funding for most of the state agencies, but it contains a full year of funding for education, which allows us to have a budget on our agenda tonight. We talked a little bit about a document that was produced by the Association of School Superintendents, AASA, because they conducted a little research to calculate the average cost estimate for some of the likely expenses school districts will incur in response to COVID. So the calculations assumed an average school district of 3,659 students with 8 buildings, 183 classrooms, 329 staff members, and 40 school buses. So obviously considerably smaller than our district. But it's worth noting that the document estimates that the average expected increase in costs for cleaning and staff, protective equipment, transportations, and such is approximately $1,778,139 for the average district. In further conversation about the state budget, it is noted that there is a significant boost to schools for school safety and mental health initiatives. So a combined $215 million is allocated for grants under these bills. And the grants, the application was released on Tuesday with a due date of June 30th. And so this funding stream can be used by school entities for cleaning and sanitizing products, training and professional development of staff on sanitation and the minimization of the spread of disease, equipment, PPE, thermometers, mental health services and supports, including trauma-informed education programs for students who are impacted by COVID, purchasing technology for distance learning, and so on. So the committee will allocate funds on or before July 15th to schools. And they said that each district will receive a minimum of $120,000. But PASBO, the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials, did some calculations on how this money will be distributed, and it is estimated that Council Rock could receive $845,605. Another thing interesting to note about what has passed recently is that the school code contains a provision now. This is an amendment to the school code. It now has a provision effective with the start of the 2020-2021 school year that the 180-day minimum required number of school days will apply, or I said, Rob Cox would correct me, shall apply, even if a disaster declaration is issued by the governor. And so as Dr. Frazier talked about in his report, we talked at length about how schools will reopen and what this means in terms of, what school districts have to do to prepare us for the opening of schools. So PDE has issued some guidelines, but basically schools, as Dr. Frazier said, need to develop a health and safety plan that's based on guidelines from the CDC, the State Department of Health, and the local county health department. This plan is approved by the school board, and it has to include several elements, including our pandemic coordinator or team that's going to coordinate our response efforts, steps to protect high-risk children and staff, how we're going to monitor students and staff, guidelines for hygiene practices, how we're going to clean and disinfect, protocols for social distancing, and procedures for restricting large gatherings. Part of this also includes the need for a plan to restart our athletics program. So that is a separate plan that the school board has to approve. And the decision to resume athletics is at the discretion of individual school districts. Obviously, the athletic plan that we develop has to align with the health and safety plan that we are producing for regular education. And any sports-related activities in the yellow or green phases must adhere to the gathering limitations that are set forth by the state. So that would be no more than 25 people if we're in the yellow, 250 people if we're in the green. And a facility cannot exceed 50% of its total occupancy. So these are all things that we'll have to consider, in the development of this plan. Sports-related activities, though, in general, are limited to athletes, coaches, and other staff members. Visitors and spectators are contingent on other criteria. So PD has provided templates for both of these plans. And so, Mr. Block, when you said that the administration has a lot of work to do to get a plan before this board by next month for opening, it's a lot of work. But finally, we also did talk about the historic ruling that took place in the Supreme Court this week, where the court held in a vote of 6-3 that discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression are prohibited under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. And the opinion was a surprise and is the first major case on transgender rights by the court. But in the brief, it said, the quote from Justice Gorsuch was, "An employer who fires an individual merely for being gay or transgender defies the law." And so collectively at the IU, there was some discussion about the need for school districts to evaluate their policies and practices for compliance with this law. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. We'll go to Mr. Hidalgo for the Council Rock Education Foundation update.
Okay, thanks. I just want to commend Denise Brooks for always having excellent, informative presentation. And it's chock full of really good information, technical stuff. And I'm going to follow with some lighthearted educational foundation, a little less technical, but still very important. So as the liaison, I just try to keep you guys updated on what's going on. And as we know, with the oncoming of the pandemic, it kind of put a freeze on the regular operations of the foundation. And so, we had a Rock the Fuge planned for, I believe, April, which was now postponed to October 2nd. And with what Denise was saying about if we're in the green and the 250 capacity limit on occupancy at the Fuge, seats could be limited. So it's important to get your tickets soon and stay positive that maybe things will open up even better and hopefully won't go backwards. So it's important to note that the proceeds for the events that the foundation put together go to support the K-12 STEAM projects not covered by the annual school budget. And they engage the children and spark their imagination to develop a lifelong passion for learning. So I really appreciate the foundation, and that's they really have a focus on providing STEAM where we may not be able to, and continue to grow in that area. So just so you know, October 2nd, God willing, we're all going to be able to gather our friends and join for a fabulous night of food, spirits, and silent auctions, items, and entertainment with a special guest performed by Bonehead at the Fuge, starting at 7 p.m. and until midnight. Plus, this year they'll have a VIP backstage lounge with specialty craft bar for those who chose to make a higher donation. And then even just that next Thursday, October 8th, the Council Rock Foundation is going to have their second annual golf classic presented by Customers Bank. So we appreciate their partnership with this event. This outing is going to take place at Philmont Country Club in Huntington Valley. And there's a continental breakfast going to be at 10 a.m., a shotgun start at 11 a.m. Followed, after we're done, there'll be a 2-hour post-game reception. So I encourage everybody to come out and support this great foundation that's doing a lot for our school district, and just appreciate the opportunity to promote that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. And with that, we'll move to Ms. McKee for the update on the Middle Bucks Institute of Technology.
Thank you, Mr. Block. On June the 8th, the Middle Bucks Institute of Technology held a virtual executive council meeting, and there was an executive session held for the MBIT School Safety and Security Practices Annual Report in compliance with Act 44, and to discuss personnel matters. Next, the work on the student-built modular house was interrupted earlier this year due to COVID, but a buyer has expressed interest in purchasing the house as is. So after reviewing the costs to date for the house and recognizing the uncertainty of what school will look like in the fall, the Executive Council agreed with the recommendation to pursue an offer from that prospective buyer. Next, we reviewed enrollment numbers. For the fall, it's expected 347 new students will be attending, along with 539 returning students. This represents an increase of 100 students as compared to the current school year. I had previously asked the business manager at MBIT about the possibility of refinancing outstanding bonds in an effort to achieve some savings. And after contacting PFM, a projection shows potential savings from a series of 2014 bonds. In order to perform a refinancing, a parameters resolution would need to come before each of the sending districts' boards. So it was then requested that PFM information be shared with our respective business administrators. As you're all very aware, Central Bucks and New Hope Solebury have already voted to approve MBIT's proposed budget for the 2020-2021 school year. And this budget will be coming before us for a vote tonight. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Frazier as our MBIT Superintendent of Record for his leadership through this difficult budgeting process. In addition, after discussion among the Exec Council members, an ad hoc committee will be forming to look at possible cost-saving measures going forward. And then finally, in conclusion, the MBIT Senior Recognition Ceremony was held virtually on Thursday, June the 4th, using a video format, and I'm sure we all want to join in congratulating these students on their achievement and wishing them the very best going forward. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. And I would imagine there is no update on the policy committee as we have not met.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. All right, Ms. Marcel, you're the star of the show tonight. You've got the lion's share of the agenda. Ask you to go through the Finance Committee update and motions. And just for the board, as we get into discussion around some of these motions, please remember to raise your hand, and I will call on you so we are not speaking over each other.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Block. I move to approve consent agenda items B through P as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwart. Are there any questions? Or are there any objections? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. Thank you, Ms. Marcel. Let's move to the letter Q.
Okay.
Mr. Block, before we move on to item Q, if you wouldn't mind, with your approval of item C in the consent agenda, you approved over 2,100 refunds due to our families as a result of all the activities that were canceled as a result of the pandemic. So I'd first like to thank our families for their patience as we process those refunds out of my office, but also publicly thank our two accounting specialists, Barbara Boyce and Lisa Lesha, who were solely responsible for the processing of those 2,100 refunds. And to give you some perspective, that's about our normal number of refunds out of student activities per year is about 20. So they worked together and created an import template that we could use to upload the information into our data system, and then also obviously process those refund checks. So I just wanted to publicly thank them for their efforts, which are really extraordinary given the circumstances. Sorry for the interruption.
And thanks for recognizing them. All right, Ms. Marcel, letter Q, please.
Before we jump into Q, I just wanted to mention that the committee, obviously, as part of our joint committee last Thursday evening, Mr. Stone provided an update on the district's insurance renewal recommendations, including coverage changes for 2020 to 2021. He discussed the establishment of a committed fund balance, approving a transfer to the Capital Reserve Fund, and a recommendation to utilize a new delinquent real estate tax collector. And then finally, we reviewed the 2020-2021 MBIT and Council Rock budgets. Sorry, I wanted to say that and it got away.
No worries.
So moving to Q, I move to approve the disposal of 2 maintenance vans because the cost to repair exceeds the value of the vehicles.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorwald. Is there any questions for Mr. Stone? Any objections? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Please note that the motion passed with unanimous consent. And with that, we will go to the piano donation. Letter R, please.
Okay. I move to approve the piano donation to Council Rock South High School.
Any questions for Dr. Elliott? Dr. Elliott, where did we get that?
Thank you, Mr. Block and Ms. Marcel. We had an alumnus who wanted to donate a piano from his family to Council Rock South, and originally had planned to bring this to the board in March, but due to the closure and our inability to accept any kind of deliveries, we delayed the work on accepting this donation. And we're very excited that we can move forward with this donation tonight. And this piano actually donation brings us into parity in our 2 high school choral rooms. North currently does have a baby grand piano in their choral room, and South does not. So now South will also have a similar model grand piano in their choral room.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Elliott. Are there any objections to this motion?
Hey, Andy, before you go on, I think we need a second, so I'll second that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for catching that, Dr. Thorwald. All right, with that second, are there any objections? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, please note the motion passes with unanimous consent, and with that, we'll move to letter S.
Okay. I move to approve the 5-year contract for multi-function copier devices and printer maintenance and support with Fraser Advanced Information Systems for a monthly lease cost of $9,127.76, a 5-year total of $747,666, and a monochrome black and white cost of 0.0038 cents per copy for copier devices and 0.0076 cents per printer, and a color cost of 0.0398 cents per copier device and 0.0517 cents per color printer, contingent on final solicitor review.
Second.
Was that Mr. Hidalgo with the second?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Frederickson?
I just wanted to know if, are we currently in a 5-year contract with our current service and we're renewing for another 5 years? That was the only question I had.
Yes, our existing contract expires June 30th, and it was time to renew it. So we did go out to bid. We posted an RFP. We had 5 responses, and Fraser came in the lowest with the Sharp equipment.
I see that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Please note that the motion passed with unanimous consent, Madam Secretary, and with that, we'll move to letter T.
I move to approve the amendment to the agreement between the Council Rock School District and the Council Rock Administrators Act 93 agreement as attached.
Are there any questions for Dr. Fraser? Any objections?
You'll need a second again. I'll second it.
I'll second it to it.
Bad management here. Bad seconding. So who's the second from?
Mr. Salomon.
Thank you, Mr. Salomon. Any questions for Dr. Fraser? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Madam Secretary, note that the motion passed with unanimous consent. Letter U, the personnel actions, please, Ms. Marcel.
I move to approve the personnel actions as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McKee. Anything of note, Ms. Taylor?
No, not this evening.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Please note the motion passes with unanimous consent, Madam Secretary. And with that, Ms. Marcel, if we could please make the motion for our 2020-21 budget, I'll require a second, then we'll turn it over to Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Block. I move to approve the Council Rock School District's final 2020-2021 general fund budget and tax resolution with a tax increase of 3.1%, equating to 130.216 mils, as contained in the attachments to this agenda and subject to final solicitor review.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Mr. Stone, the floor is yours. And thank you for all the work to get to this point today.
It's our pleasure. So Dr. Frazier and I are just going to give a very brief overview of what has been a very detailed process to get to this point of recommending to you a final budget for the upcoming year. So Dr. Frazier, I'll let you kick us off and then I'll finish up.
Thanks, Mr. Stone. And as Mr. Stone just said, this has indeed been a very difficult budget process. Anytime the economy is in a slump recession, it's going to be difficult with hard decisions that need to be made. And compounding the issue with this particular budget is the fact that we're also dealing with a pandemic with many unknowns, and therefore it's hard to predict what we'll need and what the corresponding costs would be. We are proud this evening to present a final budget recommendation to the Board of School Directors. And it's really a very well-structured budget, and we'll talk about that as we go through this. Despite the difficult economic times, I am absolutely thrilled and appreciative that we're able, if approved this evening, to add 3 elementary school counselors to our Team CR. This would allow us to have 1 school counselor at each of our 10 elementary schools, which is a desperate need of ours, and it really helps bring our strategic plan to life. So thrilled about that inclusion, as well as the addition of a new ELD teacher. ELD stands for English Language Development. This has been a need of ours in the past. We have not been able to make it work from a budgetary standpoint, and this year we are, and we are grateful for that, and we know our students in that program are going to directly benefit from it. And then we get to the piece that I was referencing about the structure of this budget. We faced just about a $16 million budget deficit at the outset of this process, and it was quite daunting. But through everyone chipping in, everyone being part of the solution, one Council Rock, we're able to make it happen. And that includes our team, our staff, salary concessions. This year alone, $2.5 million. Remember that it's 18 months total of salary concessions, so we have another couple million that will be coming in the 21-22 school year, and we could not have pulled this budget off without that. We also have significant budget reductions to the tune of about $6.5 million, and this is far more than just simply cutting the fat. We are going to do without resources and some of the tools that we've had this past year and in years past. We're going to have to do without them next year, and that's just part of us being responsive to this fiscal environment. And then, as you all know, we have also suspended our capital plan. So what that means is any project for whom we have not yet borrowed the money have been suspended. So right now, that's the turf at South, and it is the expansion and renovation of Soul Finestone Elementary. We have not yet needed to make any kind of decision on Richboro or Hillcrest Elementaries because we have not needed to borrow those funds as of yet. And then finally, the last piece from the revenue side is a 3.1% real estate tax increase, which is a difficult tax increase in this economy. And I don't think that's lost on any of us. And I'm not sure that it's an easy vote for anyone this evening as a result of that. But again, what does make me proud and really grateful is the fact that, as you can see here, we're making sacrifices all throughout this community, the school community and our entire tax base, to be able to put a budget together that's both fiscally responsible and responsible to our students. And one of the pieces that we're looking at in this budget is implementing a one-to-one Chromebook program. So we've been operating at just about a 2-to-1, 2 students for every 1 Chromebook. And with the advent of distance learning this past spring, and knowing that we might very well find ourselves in some form of distance learning, whether it's a day or 2 at a time or another couple months at a time, it's one of the things that we don't know, but it is important that we make that transition to one-to-one at this time. And then the final piece is that our budget from a COVID standpoint, again, includes about $1.1 million in federal funding. So we know that we're eligible for those funds. We intend to maximize these dollars so that the burden of COVID-19 from a financial standpoint is not borne locally. As I mentioned before, we don't know exactly what it is or how much or what the total bill will come to, but we are currently in the process of developing our spending plans based upon the federal guidance that's available. So that provides a quick high-level summary, and Mr. Stone will take you through some of the details.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. As I noted in the committee meeting last week, this really is an unusual budget for 2 reasons. The first is that the local revenues, or the revenue totals $243.1 million, represents an increase of real estate taxes of about $4.9 million and an about equal decrease in other local revenues because of the impact of the pandemic. It's similarly unusual in the expenditure line item because the $246.1 million expenditure total is less by about $200,000 than the prior year budget, the 2019-20 budget. And in a rising cost environment with state and federal mandates, this is really unique, and it's because of the salary concessions and the budget reductions that Dr. Frazier just talked about. We are, as part of this budget, facing a deficit of just over $3 million, and we will use about 14% of our fund balance in order to cover that deficit. So that's that just over $3 million right there that I'm highlighting. So we obviously have no deficit, but we hope not to have to draw out of our reserves in order to balance our budget. The real estate tax increase is 3.1%. As Dr. Frazier noted, you can see the millage information. The millage rate will be increasing to 130.216. And those properties that are eligible for either a homestead and or a farmstead credit will be entitled to a $283.42 reduction on their tax bill. Here's a pie chart of our final revenue budget. And as I've mentioned many times before, and probably starting to sound like a broken record, we are a very heavily locally funded school district, which is common for school districts in the suburbs. 76% of our revenue, or about $187 million, comes from local sources, primarily the real estate tax, but also the earned income tax and the occupation tax, as well as some real estate transfer taxes and interest earnings. State and federal sources total up to about $53 million, representing 23% of the final revenue budget. And the small dark blue piece of the pie here is the use of fund balance, coming in at $3 million, or about 1% of the total revenues necessary for the upcoming year. The final expenditure budget pie chart looks very similar, and that is because we are a people organization. We are students and teachers primarily. The rest of us support that work in the classroom, coming in at 76% of the total budget, or just under $188 million for all salaries and benefits. A significant portion of the total budget is contributions to the state pension system, or PESERS. That is 16% of our total $246 million budget. We have a manageable debt load at 8% of our total budget. And then the final piece of the pie here, this darker blue, are what we call our 300 to 900 objects, which represents all of the products and services that are necessary to run the school district, the supplies in classrooms, the contracted services that we need to clean our buildings, transport our students, as well as equipment and all the other miscellaneous items that are necessary. That total is about $58.3 million for next year. Dr. Frazier mentioned about COVID-19, which is still a tremendous uncertainty as we enter into the next year's budget, and there is really very little information, final information available to us to know exactly how much money is going to be spent. But we are thinking ahead, and our budget is, we believe, able to adapt to any of the contingencies that we might face with the reopening plans. And I'll again stress, as this rather bright yellow graphic notes, that the reopening plans are still to be determined. There's nothing been finalized yet, but we do need to be adaptable to any changes that may come as a result of the coronavirus. So we have a couple of ways that we will do that. We have a commitment that the board just approved, a fund balance, which would cover any unanticipated COVID-19 expenditures. We anticipate that will be a multi-year commitment if some of these restrictions may carry on into future years. But we're also going to be using a contingency budget plan for the upcoming year, where we will be carefully tracking our local revenues and making sure that they're hitting the trigger points that we need to see in order to be able to release the expenditures to our departments and to our buildings in phases. We do not want to be in a position where our revenues are coming in less than anticipated, but that our expenditures are coming in higher. So we are going to be very prudent in how we release funds to our departments and spend in a careful manner so that we don't end up in a position of needing to make any mid-year drastic reductions. And then the last item, we'll also earmark any specific accounts that we might need to borrow from if the expenditures exceed the amount in committed fund balance or that we've included in federal stimulus funds. And again, that's all going to be based on the final reopening plan that is developed. The budget at CRSD email address is open for folks to ask any questions about the budget. But we are recommending the budget that Dr. Frazier and I just reviewed for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. It's first full budget cycle since you've been here, right? On your own?
That's correct.
I hope that they're not all as challenging as this one, but Dr. Frazier, Mr. Stone, the entire team that put work into this, as a board, we appreciate it. It's just a difficult year and an unknown future. And you all have framed up everything that we've needed to hear in a really accessible way. So on behalf of the board, thank you. And with that, what I'll do is I'll ask my peers to raise their hand if they've got a comment or a question. Ms. Brooks.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank everyone, all the people who worked to get this budget as it is. It is not lost on any of us, the tremendous amount of effort that went into this, and just the concessions from the staff. Everything is so appreciated. I have one question and then just two comments. Mr. Stone, can you just remind me, if we use the full $3 million fund balance next year, how much will that leave us in our fund balance account?
Based on where we are currently, that will leave us with about $19 million of fund balance remaining.
Okay, so we've really started dipping into that quite a bit in recent years. So yes. We'll certainly have to keep our eye on that. I just want to make a comment that, I mean, we all say this and it's true. I mean, voting for a tax increase, particularly at this difficult time, is not an easy decision. So we have to balance the needs of keeping our school district high performing and providing to our kids. And in the spirit of that, I was just laughing to myself as I was looking at these slides. About 12 years ago or so, after seriously sitting in the audience at school board meetings for years, lobbying for one guidance counselor at the elementary level, that happened, right? We lobbied for years, a group of us, for years, to just bring a guidance counselor to the elementary level. When my kids were in school, the majority of the time, there were no guidance counselors at the elementary level. And to know that we are now bringing it to a point where every single one of our buildings will have a guidance counselor, even that, the work that they do is so huge. So I am just particularly grateful for that inclusion. And also, it's interesting how over the years we've debated of, the need for one-to-one devices for our students. Is it needed and such? But none of us in our earlier conversations could have ever predicted a need like we have now. So to be able to accommodate that through this budget is pretty great. So thanks again, and I will be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Any other board members who wish to ask a question or comment, please raise your hand. Oh, saw a hand come up. Ms. Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Block. I just wanted to take a moment to thank Mr. Stone for all of his hard work, as well as Dr. Frazier and the entire team. It was just such an amazing opportunity as a co-chair with Mr. Bialik to work with everyone on this effort. Obviously, as Mr. Stone noted, this isn't a very unusual budget, but it's during a very uncertain time. And so we're really just trying to make the best decision with what we know right now. And while I don't love every aspect of this budget, I do believe it's the right thing to do given the uncertainties and not knowing what we might be facing going into the fall. And so I just wanted to commend everyone for their work and to also, thank my board colleagues for taking my phone calls and spending so much time on this budget with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marcel. Mr. Bialik?
Yeah, thank you. So I was worried about the financial future of Council Rock 12 months ago. I've been sounding the alarm for some time. I've been talking about always looking at things through rose-colored glasses. And at some point, we're going to have a recession. We were overdue for a recession, and we're going to have to face some difficult choices. So here we are in a much, much tougher situation than I ever thought we'd be in. So there's no choice. There's absolutely no choice but to have the maximum tax increase. And this is the situation we're put in because we have very little control of the big portions of our budget, which are 76% of it is salaries and benefits. Unless we're really willing to dig in and start reducing staff, therefore reducing the quality of education to our children. So I think the number is 145 personnel we'd have to cut to not have a deficit in our budget. Of course, raise taxes to the maximum amount. We already had concessions from the teachers union, of course, that we appreciate. But again, we have no choice. We have to. I never thought I'd be in a position where I was voting for not only an Act 1 increase to the maximum amount, but I was the one who said, let's make sure we keep the exceptions in place. And here we are asking for the exceptions because we have no choice. And the reason we don't have a choice is because it will mean the failure of our district if we don't raise as much revenue as possible. And that, as a parent who doesn't have any children in school, the success of the district is just as important to me as it is with somebody who has 4 children in school or 1 child in school starting kindergarten or graduating this year or next year. My family alone put about 22 people through Council Rock. So I appreciate all of the efforts of the school district. But we're tied in, we're all tied in together. The community is Council Rock is the community. If we don't keep the school a great school, then of course our home values go down, the quality of our community as a whole goes down, I believe. So we don't have a choice. I'm really saddened to be in this position. I feel like we've done an awful lot of work over the past several years, certainly while I've been on the board. And there's been times I've been frustrated because we haven't moved fast enough. There's times I've been frustrated when I feel like we're spending on things we don't necessarily need to spend on, or we're spending on things without the idea that things could go bad in the future. And again, here we are. So I may sound like I'm scolding a little bit, and maybe it's just out of sense of frustration. I'm sitting here looking at the hypotheticals. I asked Mr. Stone for the budget forum, which we had over 300 people attend. Normally we have maybe one or two. So people are paying attention, and that's important, because I asked Mr. Stone if we needed to fund the district to the entirety to make sure that we don't lose any teachers, that we have the guidance counselors we need, that our programs are fully funded, what would tax increases look like? And he said for 2020, 2021, 3.1%. That's where we are today. I think this is going to pass. I know maybe one board member who's not in support of it. 2021, 2022, it needs to be 8.2%, well above our authority. 2022, 2023, 4.1%, 2023, 2024, 3.6%, 2024, 2025, 3.5%, for a aggregate total to 22.5%. This is what needs to be done for the district to keep it as it is prior to February, whatever. So we really have to seriously have the conversation with ourselves as board members, with the administration, and with our community about what type of school district we want. I know I'm being a little repetitive from the conversations from our committee group, but not everybody was listening to at the committee group, and I'm hoping more people listen here. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to have the committee pass a referendum that includes an 8.2% tax increase, but I'm certain that we're not going to be able to have the community pass a referendum at an 8.2% tax increase next year that we need if we continue to say everything's going to be okay and everybody's working hard and we'll do things to mitigate the potential issues. We can't do that. We can't trim around the edges and make this work. We have to get very serious about it, and we have to make very tough decisions. It's going to be closer to the 145 people that we're going to have to furlough, in my opinion, if we don't start talking about the 8.2%. So with all due respect to my other board members, we have to get in the administration, we have to get very, very serious about this. When the administration brings suggested cuts, I think we have to consider them very seriously and not just think about, well, how can we get, so I guess we don't want to micromanage the cuts, is my opinion. So that's what I'm concerned about. There's been a couple of things that have come in front of us that we've said we don't necessarily agree with. And if I was the administration, I would be frustrated with that discussion. So here's my point. I'm not happy, but I'm going to vote for this tax increase, as I think all of us are. But we have to get very, very serious. We either have to decide that we're going to fully fund our district or we're not. And if we're not, then we better have a plan for reducing programs, reducing staff. And really, that's it. They're the two things that are going to make the difference. We're already not taking care of our buildings. We're already pushing off any renovations, just like boards before us did for many, many years. And we know, all of us have talked about how we're catching up on that. So we're just passing that off on other boards in the future. So, we've got to get serious. We have to do this, and it's time to do it now. It's not, after we get back into school and see how that goes. We have the resources. Mr. Stone is plugged in. I bet if I ask Mr. Stone right now, if we can start working on zero deficit budget going forward, is that what you want to do? I bet he'd say yes. And I think Dr. Frazier may say the same thing, but I'm not sure. But I'm thinking he would. I don't ever want to see Council Rock in this position again. And to do that, we really have to dig in and take this seriously. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. I'll just echo what Mr. Bialik had said. I pretty much agree with everything he said. He went at it in a different angle. What I was just going to look at, we came into this year with a $16 million deficit. I don't think that was not a surprise to any one of us to see that. And I commend the administration and Dr. Frazier and Bill Stone and all the different unions and work groups that made sacrifices to get us all the way down to $3 million. And we are making tough decisions here ourselves as board members, increasing 3.1% in a time when a lot of people are struggling. But we have a school district to run, and we have to look at the long-term future. And so, this raise now is kind of making up for those years when we didn't have tax increases in the past 10 years. So that is where I feel I'm okay with that. But when you look at the 16 million, you go back to the original idea and the surprise, and you see the projections and everything that Mr. Bialik had just said. And you look at the fact that we cut over $6 million from that 300 to 900 section. I'm guessing that's where most of it came from. We don't really have any room, and all we're really doing with those cuts is postponing that more need next year and the year after that. 70-some% of our money comes from our expenditures come from staff and state obligations. And that's where I think the key to our success is partially going to come, is by really sitting down and really getting serious with some conversations about how we go about it. My first thing is not to cut staff, but to maybe renegotiate and maybe on the higher end of the scale. And that's where I don't want to be knocking out newer people. But maybe there's something we have to do, because we are almost at a new reset. And the hope is that maybe the economy will come back quickly and it won't be nearly as bad as we're expecting. That's the best thing that could happen. And that's not a small possibility. So, as I said, I am of the opinion that we need to engage our teachers and the teachers union specifically, to try to partner with us as much as they have already. I love that they came to the table without us even asking, as far as I know. All I know is everything went quickly. So the last point I would make is I'm not, as Kristen had said, Ms. Marcel, that, it's not everything perfect. I don't think that I'm not going to support this. I probably will support tonight. Even though when we did have these zero deficit discussions, there are certain things I think we could start serious, not taking teachers out of classrooms, but maybe some of the other, and I can't micromanage, but there are things I think that we could have possibly done differently to save, maybe $500,000 that is not going to affect the students. And we'll at least start to whittle away at this growing, ballooning budget that we cannot keep up with, from my professional opinion. We can't keep up with this. And so we all got to come together. And I think we will come together. And, there's a lot of uncertainty, so we'll keep hope alive in the future. But I just wanted to make those comments. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Thorward.
Thank you. There's a lot of things in this budget I like. There's even more I don't like. I actually agree with Mr. Bialik. We've got some hard conversations to have moving forward. Unfortunately, this isn't the year to have them. I don't like 3.1% tax increases when people are out of work and the economy is kind of not where it should be. However, I think COVID's going to burn us before it gets better, and it's going to cost us a lot of money to open and keep these schools open. So while the 2021 budget will pass here tonight and it will work, I think the 21-22 budget is going to be monumentally more difficult than this. Just pointing out that we have those hard discussions to have. We don't have them right now. Again, there's a lot of uncertainty, but moving forward, we will have them. And that's all I'm going to say.
Thanks, Dr. Thorward. Any other comments from the board? Going once, going twice. Then with that, again, I'll just thank everybody for the effort. What was a really difficult budgeting cycle, unfortunately created what I believe is a really a really easy decision. It's an unfortunate vote that we have to take. And as I have said from the beginning, I don't know how we can't do this and still preserve the sustainability of our district. And I believe that as soon as our reopening plan, to Mark's point, is completed in the next few weeks, we need to figure out what potential mitigation of ballooning costs is as we get into next year's budget cycle. So with all that said, I would ask the secretary to make a roll call vote, please.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Mark Bilek,
Yes.
Ed Tate,
Yes.
Mike Thorwart,
Yes.
Denise Brooks,
Yes.
Marion McKee,
Yes.
Joe Hidalgo,
Yes.
Kristen Marcel,
Yes.
Ed Solomon,
Yes.
Andy Block.
As reluctantly as we all are, yes. The motion passes 9-0. Congratulations to the district on next year's budget. And we were fortunate that the state kept us whole, and we will need to work hard next year, because I can't see how that'll be the case. But great job to everybody. Thank you. And with that, we'll move to Mr. Salomon and the Facilities Committee.
Hey, good evening. Facilities Committee met as part of the joint committee last week. Rather formality type stuff on the agenda this evening, and I'll go right into them. I move to approve the Council Rock. I did move up. I apologize. I move to approve consent agenda items B through F as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Dr. Thorwart was the loudest, so I'm going to take his second there. Are there any questions? Any objections? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Please note that the motion passes with unanimous consent, and unless I'm missing something, that completes our motion agenda for the evening. And I would ask for any old business from the board. Any new business from the board? Any final board comment? With that, I'm sorry?
Just one, Andy. I'm looking forward to the discussion on reopening plans as we move forward.
Yep. As am I, and as we all are, and I know Dr. Frazier and his team have got their work cut out for them, and I know the board will be very shortly hearing about exactly what that timeline will look like. So with that, I will wish everyone happy summer. I will wish our graduates congratulations on becoming alumni, and we'll see you all in July. Meeting adjourned.
Take care.